Okay, and 2020. I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules to have the meeting broadcast on COVID. Is there a motion by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Forsyth? Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. A roll call, please.
Reagan,
Aye.
Forsyth,
Here.
Lightfoot,
Here.
Sheridan,
Here.
Smithers,
Here.
Denisha,
Here.
Perkins,
Here.
Akers,
Here.
Fay, Haggard,
Here.
Biacco,
Here.
Burke,
Here.
Arquette,
Here.
Terminelli,
Here.
Curran,
Present.
14 present.
We'll have the prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
We all bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us yet again to gratefully acknowledge the contributions of those who are no longer here, but who will remain with us forever in memory and spirit. May we also acknowledge the fateful day 79 years ago at Pearl Harbor that took so many American lives and cast us into the worst conflict our world has ever seen. Furthermore, we ask that you bestow your countenance upon our beloved country and fill us with resolve while sheltering the inhabitants of our great land from the anguish, peril, and gloom that accompanies the current pestilence that has gripped our country and the world. Please guide us on our journeys home this evening and grant us all a safe return. All these things we ask in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, through whom all things are possible. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I recognize Legislator Terminelli.
Good evening. It is my honor to offer a resolution in memoriam of a deceased member of the St. Lawrence County Board of Legislators.
Would you like to read it?
I would be pleased to. Thank you. Whereas during the past year, we have lost from our ranks Darrell P. Paquin, legislator. Whereas this man was recognized as a leader in his community and was chosen to serve on the Board of Legislators representing District 14 from 1982 through 1986, as well as performing other duties for his fellow citizens. And he honorably and diligently discharged the trust so reposed in him, and he has now departed, leaving a record which we remember and which today we seek to commemorate. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we treasure the qualities of service and devotion to duty of this, our absent friend, that we rejoice in the work that he accomplished and the sorrow that he is no longer with us. And be it further resolved that in token of our respect to this departed associate, this resolution be a permanent memorial to his best.
Is there a second to the resolution? By Mr. Perkins, Mr. Denisha, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Akers, Mr. Arquette, Mr. Burke, Mr. Fay, Ms. Terminelli, Ms. Haggart, Ms. Fiacco, Mr. Sheridan, and last but not least, Mr. Reagan. All in favor of the resolution? Add Ms. Curran too, please. All in favor of the resolution?
Discussion?
Aye. Opposed?
Discussion is asked first.
Yes. I was going to recognize Ms. Terminelli.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of bringing forth this resolution tonight in honor of Mr. Paquin. It is a privilege to bring this to you. Mr. Paquin had a very long-standing presence in our community here in Messina, as well and in St. Lawrence County, as part of our government, as an elected official, but also as a mentor, a teacher, a coach. He not only was a county legislator from 1989 to 1992, but he was also a Democratic Messina chairman and also a Section 10 baseball chairman. During his time as a coach, the Messina Red Raiders won the New York State Baseball Championship in 2001, and Mr. Paquin was named the New York State Sports Writers Coach of the Year in 1999 for Class A and in 2001 for Class B. He was also inducted into the Hall of Fame. I had the privilege of having some of my earliest memories of Mr. Paquin as one of his math students. And as one of his students, I clearly and fondly remember having questions about things that we were studying in math, and Mr. Paquin would always take the extra time, whether it was during one of his planning periods or after school, to help all of his students. And then most recently, when I was getting petitions to serve as District 14 legislator, and I stopped at him and Mrs. Paquin's house to get his signature on my petition. And of course, he was in the garage tinkering away with something. And he took that opportunity to again, mentor and teach and coach, offering his perspective from his time serving on the legislature. And then just some bits of knowledge that he thought he'd share with me to support me as I moved forward. So it is my privilege to bring this resolution. Greg and Annette and Mrs. Paquin, thank you for being here with us. Truly an amazing man that will live on in memory for many.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mrs. Paquin, Greg and Annette. It's an honor to speak on behalf of your husband and your father. I did not know Mr. Paquin. I certainly did hear a great deal about him, and I reached out to many folks that did. And I'll be honest, I had an awful time zeroing in on legislative activities because most folks wanted to veer over to his sports accomplishments. But what everybody did say was how it was so important to him to research each and every issue that came before the legislature, to know it, to be able to speak to it. He was very accessible to not only the town officials, but the citizens on the street. And he's greatly missed. And I thank him for giving us Greg and the experience that I had sitting on the legislature with Greg for many years. So congratulations, and your dad and husband will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arquette. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Mr. Akers?
I didn't know Mr. Pakeman, but I do know his son. And if Mr. Pakeman was anything like his son, he was a gentleman, he was honest, he was forthright, and he honored this board and this community.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Anyone else? Seeing none? I will present the flowers. In memory of your husband, and I gotta say, I didn't know him either. I gotta say, the apple doesn't fall far. And we dealt with your son for many years. I didn't always agree, but I think we became friends, maybe not the best of friends. And I gotta tell you, as I said, the apple doesn't fall far. Your husband was the best.
You haven't taken the certificate as well. You can mention the certificate as well.
Oh,
It's there. It's there.
it is? Oh, I'm sorry.
They can take it.
Come care of the report.
It's been a long day. I'll look at the certificate and it has the resolution.
Yes.
We'll give it a hand and remember it.
No. I'll just say, can I take this off or do I have to keep it on?
You're okay.
Just a quick thank you. Dad's time on the board wasn't long, but some impactful decisions. He said it's 15 legislators because he was part of that decision to reduce it from 22. And also the dank and the SWATA board in terms of the incinerator. And Larry, I was thinking about this on the way up. The one night you mentioned the possibility of exploring the idea of an incinerator, and I could just see my father, his head snapping from the table. Again, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. And one last thing, you guys have been doing a fantastic job in terms of leading this county through this pandemic, and we're all very great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice holiday.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we're not going to say.
It hasn't changed.
See you, Greg. Take
Thank
care.
you. He doesn't want to say. Thank you for coming.
Good night. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. We'll move right along with the approval to the agenda. We have an amendment to make to it with item number 17. And that has to do with substituting a resolution in place of the one that is currently there. And you should have a copy of that. Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were we going to substitute the resolution or were we going to amend it? Or is
I think what would be,
Substitute.
to substitute? Do you want me to go down through and recognize the changes?
if you just substitute it, Mr. Arquette, and then we will present it when, in the order that it's in.
I move to substitute the resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none? All in favor? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is due to the fact that Hammond did not serve youth services, so the allocation of funds from Hammond was divided equally amongst the remainder.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The substitute resolution is approved. Could we have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 2nd meeting, please? By Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Akers and Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Our COVID update from, I believe, Dr. McGuire and Dr. Williams. Please go ahead.
Hi, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen so I can bring up my slides. Give me 1 second. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
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 Okay, good. This first slide here, there's been just a recent publication from the CDC in the last week. It's not just our county that is seeing the surge. This is just around the country. And this is just a reminder that these are all of the things we have in place to try to slow this down, because we are, and as you'll see, we're just going through a quite significant increase. So as of today, we have 1,212 cases since the response started. We have 30 new cases today. There are currently 12 people in the hospital. There are 327 who are in active isolation. And there have been 19 deaths in our county since the response started. And it was 2 weeks ago that we did a presentation. So at that time, we were at 754 in the cases that we were at. So there has been just a giant increase in that last 2 week period. And I'll be showing you that as we move through the slides. So here is the curve that I always show. This shows on a daily basis the cases that are just reported to the county. So you can see on the right side of the slide, this is looking just much different than what we saw in the spring. And on a weekly basis, it shows the same curve, but you can see the increase that we're seeing. And so during this last week, and there's still one more day for the week that we do the report, we've seen just under 250 in the cases for the week. And when you look at where we were for the first week of last month, we had 76 cases. So this is a giant increase. And when you look on a daily basis on what we're seeing is we've now hit over 40 cases per day. Last week, we were at about like 29 cases. And 2 weeks before that, we were at about like 20 cases or so. So since the first week in November, we're seeing just under a 400% increase. And the increase from last week is about 140% as an increase. So this is a very steep rise. We, to show who cases are, the average age for cases is going up a little. We do currently have an outbreak going on at one of the nursing homes. So that's mostly why we're probably seeing this. And as to look at sex between male and females, that is staying constant. It's always been just a little bit more with females. I'm sorry, my slides weren't kind of moving on my head. I apologize for that. So here is the average daily cases. And so that shows what we've been seeing by day. And then here shows just the ages of the cases. So when you look at who we're doing monitoring with the isolation and the quarantine process, currently we have just over 300 people who are in isolation. We've kind of lowered with the amount of people we have in the quarantine process. So there's just over 600. And then there are 13 people in the precautionary quarantine. And so that is for the travelers. We've closed out just under 9,000 people. And so we've had quite a bit go through the process. And so what do these numbers mean? So this increase is quite significant. Marcelo, you have to go, please. Thank you. And we're going to see this increase just into the new year. Okay. And so this increase is going to continue into the new year. Just with like the gatherings that we're going to see at the holidays and all of the indoor activities. So what does this mean for the impact on the investigation? Thank you. And for the contact tracing that we're going to be trying to keep going. So we are seeing more people. So we are just a little bit slower on how we get to people with case investigation. We can no longer get to people on the first day. It does take about 2 to 3 days, and contact tracing as well. We have brought on just many more people for the process, both on case investigation and contact tracing. And we do make sure to train those individuals so that they know the process and that we all in the department use the same kind of procedures so that we're giving just like a standardized message to the community. One of the things that we've put in place because we have slowed down is we've tried to hit certain milestones that we can be giving the community information. So our department has provided to the testing centers just some information on what to do after you get tested. So if you do get tested, you should be in self-isolation until you wait for those test results. And then we also provide information at that time when you're being tested that if you do get a positive test result, what you should do, how you can start making a contact list, just be thinking about the activities that you've done, and start to get the information or the phone numbers so that when we ask for that contact list, that can make it go just a little bit more smoother when we do the case investigation. So we are trying just to provide all of this information when you do get tested. The other piece that we're doing is as we find out about cases, we do a pre-screening phone call. So it's not the full case investigation, but we have a staff member call that person. We do verify all the address, and we do get an email address so we can send that form to start the contact tracing process. We do ask on the date that you got tested or when you started with symptoms, so we can talk about what that window is that we'll be looking for to get those contacts, and so we can start that process. And then we talk about what the isolation process is, what you should do until that full case investigation is done, what you should do if you have just some of the household members there with you, what that means just for them, and the quarantine process. So we are trying to start even sooner just to provide information. But with all of these things done, it still takes more assistance from the community at large. We are at a point where this is really a response that we all need to act into. And we just need people to assist us that when you do go for a test, you do need to self-isolate. If you are positive, you do need to stay home. You don't need to wait until you hear from the public health office. You should stay home just until you do hear from us. And if you're not hearing from us, like within 2 days, please feel free to give us just a call. And if you do know that you've been in contact with people and you can share that information so that they know that they should stay home as well, that would be very helpful because we are trying our best to add in more staff, but this increase has made us have to just work our processes a little bit different and try to work just as kind of fast as we can. So we're trying to get this information at all steps. Here is still the phone numbers for the 4 testing sites that we have. And so it's just really important that you call and you do schedule for that test. And like I always mention, these are still the same recommendations that we always have. And it's important to remember that these all work, with each other. So we don't just do one of these things. We try to add them all so that we get the most kind of benefit from all of them. So it's important to wear a mask. And so if you know that there's somebody in your family that may be sick, you can even wear your mask at home. If you're going to be spending time with people outside of your household, that's a good time just to wear your mask as well. It's important to keep that kind of distance, to wash your hands or to use hand sanitizer, to really monitor yourself, stay home, when you're sick, and to really think about what you need to be going out for. So we're at a point where our caseload is just getting so high. It's really important that you're going out for kind of what you need. And so those are the recommendations that I have. And I will stop sharing my screen as I believe Dr. Williams also has some slides to share. Thank you, everyone.
So thank you and good evening, everyone. So I'm going to go over a couple things. I wanted to start, as I always do, with just giving a national perspective and showing how trends have gone across the country. What we saw is we had a brief period of time in mid-September when the cases decreased to about 35,000. But then with a steep climb on a daily basis, we're now consistently getting more than 200,000 cases per day. As far as deaths per day, we're back up over 2,000, also on a fairly consistent basis, which is similar to what we saw when things were hitting New York City at a very severe pace. As far as the geographic distribution, and this is cases per 100,000, what we're seeing is a clear pattern where the disease seems to be spreading most aggressively in the upper Midwest. And then just to summarize, so there've been more than 14 million cases. The average daily cases per 100,000 is 57.6, and that's over the last 7 days. And we've seen slightly more than 280,000 deaths across the country. So just to get the national perspective. As far as our region, and again, we're in the North Country region, which is 7 counties, which is part of the way New York State is managing this. What we saw again over the early part of the pandemic in the summer is between 1 and 3 new cases per day. As we've talked about at the very beginning, when we were sort of worried that we had a wave in the North Country, I think clearly this was our splash. And in the North Country region, we have now 27 new cases per day on average, slightly more than that. We are above average for the North Country, as Dana pointed out. Percent positive tests, which is another important measure. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we weren't doing very much testing. And so our percent positive was up at 12.7. Now our percent positive, and this is in the region, is at 4.3%. And that's an important measure, as we've talked about, looking at microcluster designation. The new cases per 100,000 and the percent positive tests are 2 of the main measures. There's going to be an introduction of a hospital capacity measure that's not been published yet, but that'll probably be the 3rd measure. I want to talk for a minute about vaccines because there's certainly lots of information about this and lots of excitement and lots of media coverage. So as we've talked about before, there's actually 3 vaccines that are on the cusp of being available. It is the Pfizer vaccine, which is expected to be approved first. On December 10th, in a few days, there's going to be an open hearing with the FDA to determine whether it's going to receive its emergency use authorization. So if you remember, it's what's called an RNA vaccine. There are 2 doses. So there's a dose on the first day and then a dose 3 weeks later on the 21st day. The phase 3 trial demonstrated an effectiveness of 95%, which is quite high in the vaccine world. But this is, of course, also the vaccine that's the most difficult to store. So minus 70 degrees Celsius is quite cold. And that's one of the challenges that we're going to address as a community. The CDC did meet last week, and they have something called the ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And what they outlined is a phased distribution plan based on medical priorities. And if you look at phase 1A, it's healthcare personnel and long-term care facility residents. If you look at phase 1B, which would be the second group that's proposed to receive this, it would be essential workers. And they provided some examples of who essential workers are. And then in phase 1C, it would be adults with high-risk medical conditions or adults over the age of 65. These are just the 3 subgroups within phase 1. But I put this up there so that people understand that when the vaccine is released, if it gets its approval, the distribution process is going to take time and it's going to go through a number of phases. So it's not as though on December 15th, everyone can go to Kinney's or Walgreens or Walmart and get their vaccine. It's going to be distributed in a very thoughtful way and on a limited basis at first. If you look at what the rationale is for this distribution approach, especially for the long-term care facilities, what we've clearly seen is that with increasing age, the risk of death from COVID illness is much higher. So if you look at the 85 plus age group, the risk of death is more than 30% should they become infected. So with the distribution plan, I just wanted to remind people that for any emergency planning, there's basically 3 elements. People talk about the space, the staff, and the stuff. So if you're going to do vaccination on a really large scale, and this would probably be in the second phase, you need the space to do it. And so, both the county and the hospital systems are looking at some community partners, including the universities, to look for possibly like a large venue where we might be able to administer vaccination to large groups of people. As far as the staff, this can be the people who can administer this are nurses, pharmacists, providers. And I think New York State is going to continue to expand the number of people who can actually administer the vaccines. And probably the third, but maybe the most important thing is the stuff. So right now, there's no approved vaccine. So hopefully this initial vaccine will be approved on the 10th and be available for distribution on the 15th. So we have to get the vaccine first, and then we have to store it. And there's a lot of discussion about storage. Negative 70 degrees Celsius is a tall order for storage. So both St. Lawrence Health System and Claxon Hepburn Medical Center do have medical grade deep cold freezers. So we have at least 2 in the community, and the St. Lawrence Health System one can actually store more than 200,000 doses. So that would be sufficient for the entire community. The Claxon Hepburn one is also fairly large. So between those 2 deep storage, deep temperature freezers, we will have the ability to store the vaccine in the community. And we're also collaborating with some of the universities who also have these freezers. They have them in their labs for scientific purposes. I wanted to switch gears and just give an update about testing. So as we talked about at the last meeting, the Rionix instrument allows for same-day PCR. There are now instruments at St. Lawrence Health System that we started using last week. There are additional instruments that have been ordered through the health system and hopefully in collaboration with the county, as we discussed. St. Lawrence Health System is planning to deploy an instrument at Governor Hospital, and also at Messina. So we're hoping to really distribute this out throughout part of the county. And as I said before, I think this is a real game changer. So these are the most accurate tests. So these are the lab-based PCR tests. So there's no requirement for confirmation. With a rapid antigen test, in many circumstances, you actually need to get a second test in follow-up, but not for this. What we're looking at is going from a 3 to 5 day wait to a 3 to 5 hour wait. And when we're talking about the public health response and the different delays that are involved, having these rapid turnaround times really can help both the individual, but it can help the public health response. And then finally, controlling it by our local hospitals, I think is really critical. And it kind of gets rid of that variability, which I think has been very frustrating for anyone who's gone through the testing process and had to wait to get their results. I did want to mention that New York State Department of Health and really the governor has sort of put out this 5-point winter plan. So this micro cluster strategy with an increased emphasis on managing hospital capacity. The second thing is the increase and balance in testing resources. The third thing is a real emphasis on keeping the schools open safely. And I think Dana may have mentioned this in a previous talk, that change just came out that even if a community is an orange or red microcluster, there are ways for the schools to stay open in that context. So there's real emphasis on keeping schools open, kind of in recognition that the schools don't drive the incidence or the prevalence of this disease. They're really just a reflection of what's happening in the community. The fourth thing is an emphasis on controlling spread in these small gatherings. And then the fifth thing is what we just talked about, which is with the plan for a safe and equitable vaccine program. One thing that just came out recently is that when you look across the state, more than 70% of the transmission for COVID seems to occur at either small gatherings or in the home setting. So, we all just got through Thanksgiving. Hopefully people followed the recommendations in terms of limiting the size of gatherings and trying to, keep things small. But I will say that as we see the positive tests come through and we interview people, a pretty common theme is that people were with, their extended family, maybe some people who weren't part of their family, and a lot of the positive cases seem to be coming from those gatherings. I mention this because it's the holiday season, right? And so many people will be celebrating other holidays coming up shortly. And I think if you look at the rapid escalation in cases, some which we could attribute to the Thanksgiving gatherings, if people kind of repeat that same thing, we might be in a very difficult spot. I also just want to mention this issue of a common thing when we talk to people who are positive is, for many people, the fortunate thing about this illness is it's not like Ebola. If you get Ebola, you don't go to work, or if you go to work, you die at work because the case fatality rate and the speed of onset is so rapid that diseases like Ebola are not subtle. COVID is an interesting disease, whereas we've talked about, 80% of people have a mild illness. So for some people, it might feel like a flu-like illness, or it might feel like a cold. However, what might feel like a cold for you results in hospitalization for many people. And in this community, we have well over 100 people who've been hospitalized. Some of these people have been hospitalized for, like a month. The long hauler syndrome really is a real phenomenon. And we've seen this with younger people, with athletes, people who have, chronic, possibly permanent damage to their lungs, to their heart, to their neurologic system. And then, clearly some people can die from this. And as the numbers of deaths in this county increase, I think people kind of recognize that. So at my previous presentation, we talked about that wedding in Maine where one person was ill, infected a large number of people, and 7 people died as a result of that one individual. And that was clearly demonstrated. So it may feel like a cold to some people, but it has very serious implications for the community. So personal responsibility remains an important thing. There's personal responsibility and community responsibility. And as Dana mentioned, the 5 pillars of prevention are key. And I think this month we're sort of emphasizing this week we're emphasizing the stay home if sick part. And again, that's a common theme, is that many people who are young and otherwise healthy may have fairly mild symptoms. They dismiss them, they go to work, and that's where other people get infected. And that's where, if you're talking about a nursing home, the consequences for some people in those nursing homes can be death. So I just wanted to summarize by saying that, clearly nationally, regionally, and in the county, we're in the midst of a rapidly worsening pandemic. In St. Lawrence County, we've been advancing our ability to rapidly and accurately test. The Rheonics instruments are really a game changer. Hospital capacity does remain a key issue. Fortunately, both St. Lawrence Health System and Claxton Hepburn have really kind of beefed up their abilities. So we're far from maxing out our capacity, but if things continue this way, that's, there's always a risk. Safe, effective vaccines clearly are on the verge of distribution. There's going to be a phased delivery process that's based on priority groups. And that's not going to be determined by the county Department of Health or Board of Health. It's really going to be determined by the CDC guidelines, New York State Department of Health. So the vaccine rollout, however, is going to take time. And so prevention remains critical. So in the medical environment, we're really working on this new sense of universal precautions where we're just being extra careful about PPE, personal protective equipment. Isolation and quarantine, there's some discussion about possible changes based on what the CDC recommended, but so far New York State has not made any change. Social gatherings and family transmission remain critical. And I realize that during a pandemic, social isolation is a reality and it's a really unfortunate thing. However, social gatherings and family transmission are clearly driving some of the increase in cases. And then finally, the 5 pillars of prevention will always remain the foundation of our response. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Williams, I have, a couple of weeks ago, and I brought up the issue with the extended time from the folks to find out whether they were positive or negative. And that one of the folks I had spoken with that was concerned about it, they were told, well, if you haven't heard anything within 8 to 10 days, don't worry about it, you don't have it. And I know that you said that, so that's not, shouldn't be the case because in this case, no news is just that, it's just no news. I was participated in a meeting Thursday evening, one of the committees that I'm assigned to, and I gave the report that comes from Dr. McGuire, so that I can keep folks up to speed on the number of cases. One of the folks that was was participating in the meeting, that she and her daughter went to the St. Lawrence Health facility because they had the sniffles and they wanted to be sure. She indicated to me that be assured you don't have COVID, all you have are the sniffles. So that is troubling to me. And I guess I would ask what your thought is on that, and if indeed that's happening, it certainly shouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah, so I mean, I think at this point in this community, if anyone has any symptoms, and there's a long list of symptoms about the way COVID can present. And so certainly we see a lot of people who have a runny nose, who have some sinus congestion. If that's new to you, then my expectation very much would be that people would be offered testing and would have that testing. People also have some other symptoms like, gastrointestinal symptoms, which you don't always associate with what's largely a respiratory illness. those people should also be tested. So, for all these health systems are run by humans, and there are interactions sometimes where things go in ways that would not endorse, and I'm sorry to hear that happen. I will put this out to people, the legislators. If you hear of these instances, I'm always available. You can email me, you can call me. Things don't always go perfectly, and when they don't, we try and fix them. But if somebody has a runny nose and is concerned, I would very much encourage them to be tested, and we do not want to turn those people away. That's nobody's intention.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Akers.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams and Dr. McGuire, for your presentations. I do have a question. For those that have tested positive, is the medical community prescribing any preemptive medications? Certainly you said that 80% of the people exhibit, very small symptoms. But sometimes those symptoms turn into a dangerous situation. And I know in other countries that some of them have done other preemptive things. They start prescribing something, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or whatever, or something in the zinc additive or something like that. Are we actually, is the medical community actually doing anything right now about that? Or are you just requiring those that are infected to stay home and to isolate?
So, for the majority of people, they can remain at home and care for themselves, or have other people in their family care for them with appropriate precautions. There's an increasing, medical literature out there about what works and what doesn't work. And so in this medical community, we, try and practice what we think is medicine, what we think is supported by the evidence. There are things in the inpatient environment for people who are requiring oxygen and requiring other support for using medicines like remdesivir, which is a intravenous antiviral, Decadron or dexamethasone, which is a fairly potent steroid, was studied very carefully and really shown to be mostly effective in people who had an oxygen requirement. There is an indication for using an antibody cocktail by Regeneron and by Eli Lilly. There's experimental trials going on using that in the outpatient environment. And we're actually, St. Lawrence Health System is participating in a clinical trial for one of those agents. However, what we find is that people who are, at home doing reasonably well with a mild illness are not interested in, having that kind of a therapy.
Okay, so it's not.
Answers your
it's
question.
not. Yeah, it's not. It does. So it's not currently. It's not protocol at this particular time. We do have a resolution tonight that has us leasing 3 Abbott ID Now EUA rapid tests. Just kind of a surprise resolution. I guess I talked to Ruth Doyle today about it, and they're being given to us by the state. Is this a rapid test that would be actually doing the same as the Rionics, or how are they different? Could you talk to us about that, please?
Sure. So it's a rapid test. It's called a rapid molecular test. And this is where the language, I apologize, gets confusing. So of the point of care rapid tests that are available, so point of care like in a doctor's office or in a tent or something, there are rapid antigen tests. And the Abbott Binax card is an example of that. And then there are rapid molecular tests, which is what the Abbott ID Now is. The antigen test is the least accurate. The ID Now molecular test is more accurate, but not as accurate as the Rionics PCR test. So, and in fact, the Abbott ID Now was somewhat notorious earlier on for having a lot of false negatives. So there are circumstances where that one also needs to be followed up with a Rionics or another PCR test. So it's a useful test in certain circumstances, but it's not the same as a full PCR test. And it certainly doesn't replace a full PCR test. The Abbott ID Nows also, each instrument does one test at a time. And so it's not like a lab system like the Rionics where you can load on, a big batch of tests and run a testing cycle. So they're useful, but they have limitations in terms of accuracy and in terms of capacity.
So would be the importance would be to actually place them at individual doctors' offices then, if actually St. Lawrence Health Systems and Claxton Hepburn have the capability for the Rionics, wouldn't it would be smarter to actually use those tests as long as you have capacity, and these would be supplemental?
Yeah, and I think, for instance, in the school setting, when you have a symptomatic child, both the Abbott ID Now and the Abbott Binax antigen cards are considered a reasonable alternative. So again, they're point of care tests. They're best deployed in situations where you want to get testing done, right then, and maybe waiting 4 or 5 hours isn't helpful. And for instance, when we admit patients to the hospital, we test them, and we don't want to wait 4 or 5 hours to find out whether they're positive. So, for instance, we use the Abbott ID Now like in emergency rooms.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams.
Ms. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for both Doctors McGuire and Williams. I was really excited to see the news from Jefferson County that they held today and tomorrow a mass testing event. So I called there because I love to get on the phone and call up people to find out a little bit more about it. What I was told by the public relations person at Samaritan Hospital was that the testing was done in conjunction with the county. The testing was free. And the reason it was free is because they're using whatever their allocated tests from New York State are per day. And they had a system that it was an inexpensive software system that they purchased that people could make appointments online, and they had over 500 appointments made. I contacted the person at St. Lawrence Health System who'd be the counterpart, I believe, and I haven't heard back from that person. But I'm wondering if both of you would think that pursuing something like that would be helpful here in St. Lawrence County. It seems like as after the students are gone, our rate of testing is dropping off, right? So if we could test more people, we're going to find out more. And this is a way, they had a drive-up testing thing too, which I thought was great. What do you think?
So I think in principle, certainly providing greater access to testing throughout the community remains a goal. I think having 1 or 2 days of more expanded access to testing is certainly a reasonable idea. I know at times the state very directly is involved. It sounds like that was maybe not so much the state as it was the county and the hospital, but particularly as we ramp up our capacity with the Rionics, I think things like that become more feasible. We do get free testing kits from somebody called BioReference, which is through the state. The challenge that we've had is that those are the turnaround times that can extend up to 7 to 10 days. So they're free, but nobody really wants to find out that they have COVID. So there's certain challenges like that, but I think as we have increased access to in-county rapid turnaround PCR, that would be more feasible.
And if I could just add to that, so we have been in discussions with the state for a testing site to happen like that through the time since the response has started. We have made the case that we need it at times, and we just haven't been able to offer that here. So with the recent outbreak that we have, we've been in conversation with them to come up to help testing and all of that stuff. And so that is in the works, but it's through a process, and we just haven't heard back yet.
Thank you both. This was of particular interest to me because sitting here as a board member, I'm trying to think of ways that we can contribute to this fight. And I thought this was a great way that the board in Jefferson County did that. And I know you guys know a whole lot more about this, but are there other ways other than modeling the behaviors of the 5 pillars and doing what we're told each time you're here? Can you think of anything else that as a board we can be doing?
Dr. Williams or Dr. McGuire, either of you?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, just helping to get the message out, we're getting test results from hospital systems, from urgent cares. We have several people who get tested outside of the county. And so sometimes, when that happens, we don't always learn of those tests right away either. So with test results, with some of the tests still taking quite some time, with some of the test results not coming to us, like, we don't get a call, we don't get a fax, or we don't hear from the labs that are here kind of locally, we don't know about it. So it's really important that when people do test positive, if they're not connected here to our local system, that they can let us know that they share their information with the people that they've been around, because, it's still the prime way to keep it from the spread is to get people into the isolation process and to get the contacts into the quarantine process. So, it's going to take us some time with the amount that we have. And so people just really have to know that they can start that process. They can stay home. They can let people know. And that's really where we're at right now. So, on top of those 5 recommendations that we always state, the isolation and the quarantine process is just very important.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to both of you for everything. I know that your staffs are overwrought and that the phone calls and the contact tracing is monumental. I'd like to thank you both for everything you do and your staff. Thank you.
Mr. Forsythe.
Thank you. It's just a question. You hear a lot about self-isolation once you're tested positive. How do you know, or when do you know it's time to go to the hospital? Or what triggers, yeah, I gotta get to the hospital? Either one is fine.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a great question. And I think the CDC actually has a nice little handout, which I can share with people. But the thing that ends up bringing many people to the hospital and making it so they require admission to the hospital tends to be the increase in shortness of breath, and sort of a sense of air hunger, that you're coughing, but you're short of breath and you really can't catch your breath. I would say that's the single most common thing that brings people to the ER that results in admission. Now, other people do have neurologic complications from this. So that's what's tricky about this disease. People get neurologic complications. So certainly anything that seemed like stroke-like symptoms should prompt, calling 911 and being transported to the hospital. We also see blood clots in the legs. So that's another thing. Those are some of the things that should prompt people to seek care.
What about an extended fever?
So fever in and of itself is not an indication for, seeking emergency medical care. It's an indication for contacting your provider on kind of a same day basis. But as with many illnesses, fever is worrisome. People do, develop symptoms when they're having fevers, but the fever itself is not an indication for like seeking emergency care. I should
Okay.
add, by the way, chest pain, because people do end up having heart attacks as a result. So chest pain, increasing shortness of breath, neurologic symptoms, or pain or swelling in one leg would be the main things I'd be looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burke.
Given the increase in the number of cases we've had over the past weeks, I'm wondering, have you developed a trend line for the upcoming weeks? And then the second part of that would be, are we ready from a public health perspective and maybe from a community perspective as far as our hospitals are concerned? I think you touched on it a little bit, but specifically, it certainly appears the numbers are going up, and for at least the short foreseeable future may continue. If you wouldn't mind commenting on that, I'd appreciate it.
So I don't have a trend line. It's difficult to say. Some weeks we've only seen a few case increase, and then in this last week we saw a great increase. It really depends with these upcoming holidays and with the family transmission and the small gatherings. I mean, it's really on the actions too of those who are, going to be doing gatherings and things like that. I mean, that's where most of the cases are being seen. So I don't have a trend line. We have continued to add staff. We have our contact tracing staff has greatly increased. We have people now who have been helping the department who are strong in doing so, and they're new to it, but they're doing very well. So we're very happy with that. We've continued to get more case investigators. We probably have 3 times that of what we did have, but with the constant increase, we have to continue to do more. And while more staff is helpful, it's the coordination of all the pieces and the amount of information that comes in and all the test results and just, keeping it all straight is also a piece that we're just trying to manage, because it's just so much information and we don't want any of it to get lost. So we are, we're trying to balance, the increase of the cases, the increase of the staff, and keeping everything moving so that we're providing everything that we can. So I mean, we are working our best to just continue the increase, but I don't have an estimate of what's going to happen. I do feel, and I am planning, that we are going to continue to increase. Not that I want to, but I think we have to do that, just to be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that has a question? Seeing none? Mr. Fay.
Yes, Doctor, as people, both doctors I'm talking to, as people have been laid off longer now, some of them basically were furloughed before, now they're getting laid off and losing their insurance. Should we as legislators, we certainly aren't medical people, but should we be worrying about how these people are going to be tested with no money?
So, I mean, I don't know that you should be worrying about them, how they should get tested with no money. I mean, the systems are supposed to be set up so that, and I will say that my community health center, which is a federally qualified healthcare center, is designed to take care of people who are uninsured or underinsured. So as a safety net clinic, that's always available, and we do testing there. But at St. Lawrence Health System, and I believe at Claxton, there are still opportunities for people without insurance to access testing. There's really not supposed to be a cost to the individual. Some places charge a collection fee for the swab collection, but I think in certain circumstances, even that can be waived. What I would say as a medical professional is I'm more worried in a way about the non-COVID related care that they're going to have a hard time accessing. Because one thing that we've seen is there's been a tremendous focus on COVID, is that all the other illnesses that are out there have not gone away, and people's care-seeking behavior has changed, and people's access to care has changed. So we see people with complications from diabetes that usually would be quickly detected in a routine doctor visit that are now resulting in amputation. So I worry about the lack of insurance impacting COVID-related care, but also non-COVID related care. And I think as a medical community, we have to do everything we can to address that.
Okay, can I ask you one more question then in this area?
Yes, sir, certainly.
Basically, I have two children that are in elementary school and they got sniffles. They get sent home basically, so they get tested. As a parent, I pay the copay. And a week later, 2 weeks later, because they were tested negative, they're back in school sniffling again. And you talked about that earlier, and they should be tested. So they go back home and the parents say, I paid the copay the last time. I'm not paying again. Out of school. I think that's going to happen. I believe it is happening in some cases.
Yeah, and I think, one thing is if any of the communities do get to the point where they're considered a microcluster, New York State did provide free rapid antigen cards that the county has to deploy in those instances. Not so much for what you're describing, it's more for if there were a cluster designation. But I think trying to leverage things like that in those particular situations would be helpful. The copay situation is tough because that's dictated by the insurance companies, not by the hospitals and not by the providers.
So if I get a phone call and they simply say they don't have any money and their kid can't be tested, are you telling me that I could send them to one of these centers and they still would be tested if they had an appointment?
They would be tested, and I believe each center has the ability to try and waive or address the copay.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I'm not joking that I say if people have a problem to reach out to me and I will get back to you, and because sometimes when you guys identify these problems, it's emblematic of problems that other people are having in the community. So if I know about it, we really are trying to do our best and we really do try and solve it. So I do welcome communication about these issues.
Thank you again.
And we
Thank you.
have heard from Claxton, and so they function to make sure that that each person who comes for a test can as well.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, Dr. McGuire, Dr. Williams, thank you very much. Very informative as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, we'll move on to communications. And I
have
do not.
two. I have two
You have-
communications. Yes.
Go right ahead.
A resolution was received from the city of Ogdensburg authorizing the city manager to sign a St. Lawrence County Hazmat Team intermunicipal agreement. A resolution was received from the town of Norfolk to support the city of Ogdensburg proposed change in the county sales tax apportionment to local municipalities. Mr. Lightfoot, I also have an email that we received for citizen participation, and we have a video to show.
If there are no more communications, we'll move directly to citizen participation.
Okay.
And let me read the address here first. Any citizen wanting to address this board is asked to stand at the podium during the time that they address the board. The address will be limited to a time of 5 minutes. Please state your name before beginning your address. And we'll start out with you, Kelly.
Okay. I received an email from Kathleen Stein of Canton. She said, I write as president of the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County to urge the members of the county legislature to support the proposed DANK survey of broadband access in St. Lawrence County. Although I realize that the coronavirus is severely straining budgets at the municipal, county, and state levels, the study is not the place to exercise short-sighted fiscal restraint. In the modern world, broadband internet access is critical public infrastructure, and the pandemic has demonstrated its importance in a particularly stark manner. To cite one example, which others will probably mention as well, county school districts are being compelled to send buses out to establish hotspots to enable students to complete their remote learning schoolwork. Spectrum, as a private company, will not identify the areas where they have found it unprofitable to extend their infrastructure. As a result, the DANK survey is our only way to ascertain precisely how many students lack broadband access or are simply unable to afford it. Education, of course, is not the only sector handicapped by spotty access. Businesses have been relying on the internet for years now, and not just for online commerce. In the past year, due to the coronavirus, more people than ever have been working remotely, and many of them are expected to continue to do so even after the pandemic subsides. Other North Country counties, Lewis and Jefferson, have had or are having DANK survey their broadband service. If St. Lawrence County fails to gather this crucial information now, we will put ourselves at a serious disadvantage in the future. It will impair our ability to support existing businesses or to attract new ones, and to accommodate the increasing number of our residents working from home. I encourage all members of the legislature to vote to fund the proposed DANK contract and to make this important investment in the future of St. Lawrence County. Kathleen Steen.
Thank you.
And we have a video that Dylan will play as well.
All right.
So, point of information, Chair, are videos actually allowed? I mean, I have no knowledge of what the content is or anything, but
Are
actually
videos
allowed in citizens' participation?
I guess they are.
Are they? Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, my name is Eileen Raymond. I live in the village of Canton, and I have lived in St. Lawrence County since 1992. When I came to work at SUNY Potsdam in 1992, we had good computer networks on campus, but only dial-up for any kind of distance access. Finally, when I moved to the village of Canton, I was able to get cable internet, and now that internet access and Wi-Fi are an important part of my life, and it's all because I live in the village. But what about the folks who live outside the incorporated areas of our county? Since the pandemic, we have learned how essential being connected is. When school and work moved online in the spring, not everyone could take advantage of that. When vital information was only available online. When free public Wi-Fi services like the public library were closed. We learned that everyone doesn't have the advantages I have. I live where the wires come, and I have the money to buy good service from Spectrum. But we've heard about fellow citizens who had no such access. When the schools closed, we learned how fragile online services are. When students without Wi-Fi missed classes, even though the school had issued them all Chromebooks to take home with them. When Canton Central had to turn buses into mobile hotspots, families took their children to parking lots to log in and learn. We also learned from others that the services that were available were unreliable, often down, and not conducive to getting work or schoolwork done. Now we have the opportunity to finally really document where the services are not in existence and where they are not adequate to serve our county's economic and learning needs. The DANK proposal that you have in front of you today allows us for the first time to do a really comprehensive survey and identify those areas outside of it in a smaller size scale than the census tracts allow. We will be able to use that information to help with economic development of our county, and we will certainly all be able to make our educational resources that we are so proud of here more accessible to everyone. I urge you to approve the DANK proposal.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Seeing none, we will move on to the presentation of resolutions. Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an extension the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services Office of Interoperable Emergency Communications for fiscal year 17 Operation Stone Garden Grant.
Is there a second? By Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Denisha?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the New York State Office of Homeland Security for fiscal year 20 Emergency Management Performance Grant Supplemental. Move for its approval.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Denisha?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a maintenance contract with Business Electronics for voice recorders in the 911 dispatch center. Move for its adoption.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Denisha?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an extension of a lease agreement with St. Lawrence Louis Boces for an emergency services communication tower on the White Hill property in the town of Parishville. Move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Denisha?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution granting authorization to accept a donation of a vehicle from the city of Ogdensburg for the office of the district attorney. Move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Reagan and Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Denisha?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with ARC Jefferson St. Lawrence for the operation of the public transit system for St. Lawrence County. Move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Akers and Mr. Reagan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Bensky and Company for Article 6 State Aid processing for the Public Health Department, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Akers, Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have another resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Dr. Benjamin Guda for pharmacist services for the Public Health Department, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Akers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with James McGinnis and Associates Incorporated to provide billing processing software for the school program for the Public Health Department, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Fay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign contracts for early intervention services for the Public Health Department, setting 2021 rates for early intervention services, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign the 2021 annual update plan for funding with the New York State Office for the Aging, and move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have another resolution authorizing the chair to sign contracts for community services, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second by Mr. Akers? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an extension of the contractual agreement with local tenant staffing agencies, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second by Mr. Perkins and Mr. Akers? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan?
I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an amended contract for one-time grant funding from New York State opioid response and modifying the 2021 budget for community services, and I move for its adoption.
Seconded by Mr. Forsythe and Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
Yes.
Biacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Sheridan?
Mr. Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign contracts with sub-recipients for comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance abuse site-based program funds through community, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Akers, Mr. Reagan, and Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? Mr. Burke?
I won't be supporting this. The basis for awarding the contract was flawed. And I do have a question. Are there specific deliverables with these subcontracts or the contracts with subrecipients? Are there specific deliverables that the county is expecting?
County Administrator, can you comment on that?
Sure. I believe there are a couple areas where those measurables, and I believe Jay is on as well, could be addressed. One will be in the grant itself, as well as the subrecipient contracts. So there's, I think, two places where that could be identified.
Go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Just a follow-up. Will we be responsible for seeing that those deliverables are met, since the contract was awarded to us and we're doing it as, it sounds like, as a subcontract? Will we be held accountable to the metrics associated with this grant?
Yes, we will.
Anyone else? Thank you, John. Mr. Akers?
I would urge everyone to vote for this. These are monies that will go to Seaway Valley Prevention Council and actually Grace House. Grace House is a home for women that are subject to many needs and primarily addiction services. In our discussion at Community Services, St. Lawrence Health System said that they are planning on having the OTB open between 6 months to a year is their timetable. So I think any further delay on this matter that is not being helpful for people that are suffering from addiction, and we need to move forward. It's St. Lawrence Health System is a very worthy recipient. This proposal's been voted on 3 times by the Community Services Board, and each time St. Lawrence Health Systems has been the winner of this matter. And indeed, one of the presentations was done before this full board and was available for the public on Zoom to listen into. So I think the matter has been discussed fully, and any delay, like I said earlier, will subject those that suffer from addiction to be delayed for services that could change their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Anyone else? Mr. Burke?
Well, I certainly agree that we need to have quality care for people that have that are suffering from addictions. But the fact that we have no plan, we have no community plan to address the huge problem with addictions. This is piecemeal at best, and I know COVID has certainly taken over the majority of the concerns, but we're doing very poorly in addressing the opioid problem in St. Lawrence County, and I don't believe there's any plan. It's certainly a concern, and that's the nature of my concern about this particular expenditure of money, that it was done without public scrutiny. The decision by the Community Services Board was done without the benefit of the public being able to witness the process and weigh in on the process. So 6 to 12 months away, I would say that there would have been plenty of time to have had the public involved.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Anyone else? Mr. Akers?
So this is part of the community plan. We know that right now the clinics that offer methadone services are in Watertown, Plattsburgh. And locating this clinic in Messina is about halfway. It's about 90 miles in each direction. We know that we have people who suffer from addiction that are using methadone actually to help them in their addiction, that they're traveling as far as New York City. So it is part of the plan. It was subject to public scrutiny, and the programs being for both St. Joseph's, St. Lawrence Health Systems, and the county, and the proposals before the total board, before the whole public, for anybody that wished to look at it. And actually, it's recorded. They can access it anytime they would like. So I urge my colleagues to support this endeavor.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Reagan?
I would just like to join Mr. Akers in urging everyone to support this plan. I think for too long, we've had this drug epidemic in our midst, and it's time that we began new ways to provide treatment and provide alternative treatments for those for whom other treatments have not worked. We just can't sit by and continue to watch people die and families be destroyed. This is an opportunity that we have to provide another tool in the toolbox for our medical professions so that they can, if they feel this is a good fit, help individuals for whom other treatments have failed miserably. This program also brings to bear our hospitals. And I think there's no one better equipped to help these individuals in need than our hospitals. And not only can they help provide this particular treatment, but our hospitals can provide a whole array of services to help these individuals and help their families and help us turn around a problem that has afflicted us for too long and which is growing in our midst. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Anyone else? Ms. Curran?
Yes, thank you. So I know Dana has worked really hard on the opioid task force, and she's done quite a bit in the community to help people get away from the stigma of even talking about this. I can tell you, as somebody who's worked in emergency medicine and with Suboxone treatment, there are people who are outliers that need more, that need the daily interaction with somebody, and that need to have a place to go, that also can kind of screen and have a social worker and other people that are there to interact while this is all going on. So I think that this will be a wonderful thing for our community to have this for people. And what it does is now in Messina, you go 90 miles to Plattsburgh, you go 90 miles to Watertown. This will make people's drive 45 miles or less, hopefully, which will cut down on their travel time. But we do still have people who drive all the way to New York City to get treatment for even Suboxone because they don't want anybody to know what they're up to in their own community.
Thank you. Mr. Arquette?
Thank you. I don't think that anybody on this board underestimates the magnitude of this opioid problem in our county. I also don't think there's anybody amongst us that are trying to hold up the process in any way. At the beginning of this procurement process, we made it very clear that we were seeking a level of transparency that was never allowed. We needed more public involvement. There's too many unanswered questions. There's too many concerns around the county not handling this as I believe should be. So, I'm going to be voting against this simply because I don't think this was procured properly from the onset. Thank you.
Ms. Haggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know too many people that don't know somebody or even have a family member that may have struggled with this problem. It is far reaching. And as Mr. Legislator Arquette just said, it has nothing to do with not wanting this program. The reason I'll be voting against it is how it came about and who it's going to. It has nothing to do with not wanting to do something for opioid treatment. Many of our own families have been touched by people with addiction problems. I understand that it's a huge problem, and I don't want it mischaracterized that when you vote against this, that we're voting not to do something about the opioid problem. It's about, as Mr. Arquette mentioned, the transparency and the decision to go with St. Lawrence Health System. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Burke?
Just thank you, Tony and Margaret for clarifying that. Nobody's disputing the need for it. Not for a minute are we disputing the need for it. As a matter of fact, what we're saying, it's very much needed, and we need more. We need a comprehensive plan to address the opioid problem. The issue here has to do with $900,000 of taxpayer money, and our concern that the issuance of that money be done appropriately and with transparency. That's the issue, not whether we need the service. And certainly there isn't a board member that wouldn't agree that having a methadone clinic is very much needed. So again, thank you, Tony and Margaret, for clarifying that.
Anyone else wishes to speak? Seeing none, all in favor?
Request a roll call, sir.
Roll call's been requested.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
No.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
No.
Haggard,
No.
Piacco,
No.
Burke,
No.
Arquette,
No.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
9 yes, 6 no.
Resolution is carried. Mr. Sheridan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign the 2020 Resource Allegation Plan signature page and move for its
Is there a
adoption.
second? By Mr. Perkins and Ms. Terminelli. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr.
Chairman, I have a resolution approving the 2020 Resource Allocation Plan RAP program of the Office of Children and Family Services and authorizing the chair to sign contracts for youth development programs, and I move its adoption.
Mr. Sheridan, we're going to go with the substitute to this resolution. If you have it on your desk.
I don't think I have that on my desk. Okay. I was one that didn't get it. Anyway, let's scrap that last resolution I introduced, and we'll go with the substitute, Mr. Chairman. And this resolution authorizes the chair to sign contracts.
Is there a second? By Mr. Sheridan, excuse me, by Mr. Reagan, Mr. Akers, Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Smithers, Ms. Curran, and Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? Ms. Terminelli.
I'll be recusing from this vote because of affiliation with one of the organizations listed.
So noted. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan.
Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract for support cases between the Department of Social Services and the Office of the County Attorney, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second by Mr. Akers, excuse me, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Reagan, and Mr. Forsythe? Any discussion? Ms. Haggard?
I will be recusing from this vote, Mr. Chairman.
So noted. Mr. Burke?
I certainly support the help rendered to Department of Social Services, but I'd like to ask Cindy a few questions if I could. Cindy's been there now for about close to 4 months, and I'd like to maybe get a status report of where we are as far as the needs are concerned. If I could, I'd like to ask you to recognize Cindy.
Ms. Ackerman, are you prepared to respond?
Sure, I can give you a brief update.
All right, please do.
So in regards to the contract for USS Legal and the county attorney, that is definitely something that we're on board with. We have enough going on here that I think having that at this time will definitely help the department as we, focus on our children in care. The only thing I want to put out there for the contract is that we do have to have, once it's developed, we do have to have it approved through OTDA, and that's been backlogged a little bit. So I just want to make sure that that information's out there. It's been taking us at least 3 weeks to a month or more to receive anything back, and sometimes we have to go back and forth a couple times before it's finally approved. So that's the only thing I wanted to put out on there. In regards to other updates, we've had a lot of construction going on here. Things are going great. The building is slowly but surely beginning to have a facelift for sure. I think that's been a great morale for staff. We, continue with the COVID issues as everybody else, but we've had a lot of support through our IT department and other departments helping us maneuver through this. And we have, I would say, probably 98% of our staff have the accessibility to work remotely. We have some staff that are actually helping public health, and we've had to, we've been using the whole new phone system, I think that Rick had talked about before as well, helping some of our other staff work remotely and not only support their unit, but support some of the other units as well during this time. So the next thing that we have moving forward, once we kind of get through the whole contract with support, we're also working on the Family First initiative. This is something that started in 2018. It's probably one of the biggest pushes from the office of OCFS that there's been in a long, long time. So the initiative actually is called the Family First Prevention Act, and is to reduce the number of children in congregate care settings and also to increase use of kinship for children who must be in foster care. I think the bigger push is really just to get these kids out of homes with unfamiliar people and get them more into homes with family, extended family, whatever family that we can possibly find. There's actually another piece of this. It's called the kinship firewall, and it's a piece of this transitional piece into kinship where they are actually mandating you, not only us, but the core systems and everybody involved to make sure that we are looking into the kinship piece prior to, looking for any alternative placement for these children. So we've been, we're kind of a little behind on that. It was something that started in 2018. Some funds came out for this program in 2019, and a plan was put in place to start this process. But I think that there just hasn't been a lot of leadership here to push that process through, so it got a little bit behind. In the end, in September 2013, we are being mandated to have 30% of our children in kinship. And right now we currently have 7% of our children in kinship. And we're also mandated to have, or to decrease our congregate care level down from 10% to 8%. And right now we're at 14% there, so we're doing a little better there. We did just have a couple more children come out of congregate care. So if you want to look at kind of a cost analysis for that, that can go anywhere from $780 a month, $780 a day, down to about $70 a day. So even bringing those kids out of a congregate, I can't speak this late, care setting does help us decrease the money that we're spending for these kids, and it actually brings them down into a program where they have a better chance towards permanency and a lesser of a restrictive environment to work in. So what we're going to do, we've got a plan in place. We're starting this week. We have a meeting. I actually pulled together, we're calling it our strategic committee, and it's some really dedicated staff here. So we're all going to pull together for an hour to a week. We're going to put together a strategic plan. We're also involving Colin, our financial manager, so that we can make sure that we're watching the finance as we go through with this. We're going to develop a month-by-month kind of like objectives and outcomes so that we can measure from where we are now through our goal will be September 2021, so that we know kind of what we need to do to work to get there. There were some initial funds that were put out for this transitional piece. OCFS put out about approximately $45,000, And then there was other funds put out through, I can't remember the name of the place. It was the Rulick Foundation. They gave another 12,000. So that money would have been better used, I think, if we were more prepared towards like a kinship navigator, someone kind of looking into the process of, moving kids out, so we would be at a higher percentage at this point. But it didn't really get spent that way. So what we need to do is kind of reevaluate, kind of look at what we're doing, what we're spending, try to bring some more kids out so we can balance out the funding so that we can process through. We have a lot of work to do, but we have a really good group here to do it. So one step at a time, like we've been doing everything else, and we'll get there. So that's kind of our next big initiative moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Burke, I think you got a little more than you asked for, but go ahead.
Well, actually, it was wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. But I guess I just wanted to ask, you mentioned we're at 7% and we need to be at 30%. Did you say that, Cindy? Or
yeah, right now we have 7%. We have 323 children in care. So 7% of those children are actually in a kinship foster care. So what we need to do is just revisit a lot of those cases, see what we can do to track down kinship, and see what we can do to kind of reassess them and see if we can, find family that maybe we even haven't had time to track down, or different things like that. I think the only issue we may have is we do have generational poverty here in this county. So sometimes it's, it's the whole family, it's generation after generation. But, we have a lot of staff here that know a lot of the family history. So that's a bonus. So I think really moving forward that, I think once we get our goals set and really focus on what we need to do, we can certainly get, I don't know if we can get to that, but we're certainly going to work hard to try to do it. So.
Thank you. So you will have a plan, Cindy. You'll be developing a plan.
Yeah, we're all going to work together this week. We have a meeting Wednesday. We're going to meet for 2 hours, and everybody's been doing some research. Everybody has their homework, so they're going to bring all their homework to the meeting and start putting things down in a timeline.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm glad you're there.
Is there anyone else that wants to address the resolution? Mr. Akers.
Well, I wholeheartedly support Cynthia Ackerman's support for this resolution, which she stated at the very beginning. And I think by the county attorney taking on these support cases, that should lessen the load on social services legal, and then the legal department of social service can work on these foster care cases. They are our most expensive cases, and I'll be supportive of this, and I hope my colleagues join me.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to offer a resolution authorizing the purchase of 2 Rionic rapid fully automated COVID-19 testing workstations and modifying the 2020 budget. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By everyone in the room? And Mr. Fay, Ms. Terminelli, Ms. Fiacco, Mr. Burke, Ms. Haggart, and Mr. Arquette. Any discussion? Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to be added as co-sponsor to this resolution.
So noted. Anyone else? Ms. Curran.
Can I be added as a co-sponsor as well?
So noted. Anyone else? Seeing none, roll call, please. Oh, Ms. Haggart, did you want to speak, or? Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted that my name appears as a co-sponsor. I think this is a really great example of us working together, as we often do, but for something that came about very quickly and will have an immediate impact once these machines are in place on the pandemic. So I want to thank all my colleagues that brought this up, and of course I'd be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Akers?
Just in talking with the county administrator today, the expectation which she was going to check on, we should have these before the end of the month. That's the plan.
Good news. Good news. Anybody else? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
Yes.
Piacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution modifying the 2021 budget for the Department of Highways and appropriating road machinery fund balance to the 2021 road machinery budget for purchasing equipment. I move this resolution.
There's a second. Second by Mr. Perkins, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
I'm sorry. Yes.
Piacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution approving a supplemental agreement number 2 and authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. for construction and inspection services for Browns Bridge Road over the Racket River project, PIN number 322-1560, PIN number 775380. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Sheridan. Any discussion? Mr. Perkins?
I'll be abstaining due to my employment.
So noted. Anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution modifying the 2020 budget for the solid waste department for higher than anticipated expenses. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Sheridan. And Mr. Burke. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
Yes.
Piacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution concerning elections, real property, and community college apportionments for the year 2021. I move this resolution.
Seconded by Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to convey the car site located at 97 Main Street, Herman, to the town of Herman. I move this resolution.
Seconded by Mr. Denisha and Mr. Smithers, excuse me. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
Yes.
Piacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution for charging tax items. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution adopting the mortgage tax report. I move this resolution.
Seconded by Mr. Forsythe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Compliancy Group LLC for consultation services and the maintenance of a repository for HIPAA compliance. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a lease agreement for space at 21 Harrogate Commons, Messina, New York. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution establishing a date and a time for the organizational board meeting. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution declaring October 2021 as the first St. Lawrence County History Month. I move this resolution.
Seconded by Ms. Curran and Mr. Smithers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution modifying the 2020 budget for the Historical Association for Web Development to provide access to archives for the public. I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Perkins and Mr. Reagan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Excuse me, roll call, please.
Haggard,
Yes.
Piacco,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the creation of a reserve for the 2020 appropriations for the Bassmaster Tournament. I move this resolution.
Second by Ms. Curran, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Reagan, and Mr. Forsyth. And Mr. Arquette. Any discussion? Ms. Curran.
Can I be added as a co-sponsor, please?
So noted. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a resolution authorizing the filling of vacancies, and I move this resolution.
Is there a second? By Mr. Smithers, Mr. Akers, and Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Civil Service Employees Association Local 1000, Unit 8427, and I move for its adoption.
Is there, seconded by Mr. Akers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Sheridan.
Mr. Chairman, I have a resolution authorizing the county attorney to support the town of Clare in the legal defense of pending legal action known as Adirondack Council versus Town of Clare. I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? By Mr. Smithers and Mr. Akers and Mr. Perkins and Mr. Denisha. Any discussion? And Mr. Arquette. Sorry about that. Mr. Perkins.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
So noted.
So would I like to be added.
So noted for Mr. Sheridan. So noted for Mr. Arquette. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Ms. Haggard.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a lease agreement with St. Lawrence Health System and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center for Rheonics Rapid, fully automated COVID-19 testing workstations, and I move that it be adopted.
Is there a second by Mr. Denisha, Mr. Smithers, Mr. Reagan? Any discussion? Excuse me. Do you want to be added or do you want to comment? Which one, Ms. Terminelli?
Added.
Added,
Yes,
so
please.
noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Fiacco?
Added, please.
All right, noted. Anyone else? Mr. Burke?
Add it, please.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Ms. Haggard?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a lease agreement with Health Research, Inc., HRI, for laboratory equipment to be used to provide COVID-19 testing and subsequently lease agreements with the St. Lawrence Health System and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center for the use of the laboratory equipment, and I move for its adoption.
Before we second that, it needs to be amended. And if I could tell you what needs to be amended, if someone would move that, I would appreciate it. As the resolution goes, and I'll pick it up at the start of the fourth line, agreements with St. Lawrence Health System, insert then Community Health Center of the North Country. Community Health Center of the North Country. After that, and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center for the use of the laboratory equipment remains the same. It also needs to be amended in the third whereas, after, whereas subsequently St. Lawrence Health Systems insert Community Health Center of the North Country. And in the now therefore be it resolved at the at the fourth line that starts with the word system, after the word system, insert Community Health Center of the North Country. Is there anyone that is not clear on that?
I was gonna make.
Could I have a motion to amend the agenda by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Reagan, as to the amended resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. As to the amended resolution, any discussion? Excuse me, it needs to be seconded. Seconded by Mr. Perkins and Mr. Arquette. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Forsythe, would you read the next resolution, please, or move it? And this also needs an amendment that I'll give you.
Mr. Chair, I offer resolution authorization to extend flexibility to St. Lawrence County employees for the option to access vacation buyback accruals and extend personal time accruals during the COVID-19 response.
Seconded by Mr. Sheridan and Mr. Perkins. This resolution also needs to be amended, and the amendment would be found in the "but it further be resolved" that with county staff with a critical function to operate, and what would be added is with a minimum of 300 hours. With a minimum of 300 hours. It also, that would take the place, and what would be struck is in the second line of the same paragraph after the words in brackets, at the maximum amount of their accruals would be struck, and it would be replaced with a minimum of 300 hours. As to the resolution, is there a motion to, or excuse me, as to the amendment, is there a motion to the amendments by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Ms. Curran? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment. Mr. Forsythe.
I guess, what's the rationale of it? I guess it's just.
It's limiting the number of hours that can be used instead of just no amount having been set forth in the resolution. Go ahead.
So the initial benefit that was provided to county employees was in a matter of a circumstance where they had reached the cap of their hours. So they were maxed at 400 hours and they were denied time off. And when we took a look at that benefit, and if you recall, it ended, the period ending in July, we had about 18 people that were able to take advantage of that. So when you look at the county workforce, managers did a great job of being able to get folks time off, as we all know they need respite. We're heading back into arguably a more challenging time relative to employees being able to take time off. So rather than looking at the maximum, I took a look at the numbers and looked at employees who would have a minimum. So rather than put them in a situation where they didn't have time, that would demonstrate that they have banked some vacation time, we would make it available to employees who had a minimum of 300 hours, not maxed out. So that significantly increases the number of employees that would be able to access if they weren't able to take time off.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, as to the amendment, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. As to the amended resolution, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next resolution, time sort of caught up with it, and it is no longer able to be addressed if we wanted to, so there's no action necessary. I'd entertain a motion to remove that from the agenda by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Denisha. and Ms. Haggard. Any discussion? Mr. Akers?
So upon removal would be the status, the existing agreement would remain?
That's correct. Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
One opposed. Mr. Akers? Carried. 2 no. Mr. Perkins? Mr. Perkins and Mr. Akers are no's. Mr. Akers?
So this resolution is tabled. Have I taken a motion to remove this from the table?
No, you're at,
The county administrator says yes.
The day.
oh, yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, forgive me.
So
It's been a long
I would,
afternoon.
Make a motion to remove this from the table.
Is there a second? By Ms. Curran, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Smithers, and Mr. Denisha. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. It's off the table. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the Development Authority of the North Country, DANC, for broadband survey assessment and modifying the 2020 budget for the county administrator's office.
Seconded by Mr. Smithers, Ms. Curran, Mr. Denisha, Mr. Reagan, Mr. Forsythe, and Mr. Akers, Mr. Burke, Mr. Dan, excuse me, Mr. Fay, Ms. Terminelli, Ms. Fiacco, and Mr. Arquette, and Ms. Haggard. Did I miss anybody? Mr. Sheridan. Any discussion? Mr. Akers.
So I believe that in the committee meeting, when we were actually discussing it, that I think Legislator Terminelli brought forth some information from BOCES, and that I thought that because of certain information that BOCES had, that the cost of this program, as far as the county share, would be reduced by $6,000. Could I inquire of the county administrator if that is true, and if so, then this would need to be amended?
I think there's a couple things going on there. So I think Legislator Terminelli provided some information about data that was captured by BOCES, but that wasn't to the extent that what this survey would accomplish. And then Planning Director Fotenhauer spoke today, and I believe there was an amount, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I believe it was 12.5, so it's going to be divided by the counties, and ours was going to be 62. Maybe Jason's there with us. He could speak to that number. Jason, what was that number again, Chairman, if you don't mind? Okay?
If I'm okay to speak to it, you're correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct, Ruth. It was reduced by $12,000 in its totality, so that would be $6,000 savings for the county. And that was a result of some data that was going to be provided from Slick Network Solutions, as well as some data that the county had in its possession.
Did you want to offer an amendment?
So I would like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer amendment to change the dollar amount, the contribution from $38,250 to $32,000, or I mean, yes, to $32,250.
Is there a second?
Second it.
By Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Fay, and Mr. Reagan. Any discussion as to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All right, the amendment is carried. To the original resolution then. Any discussion on the amended resolution? Mr. Reagan.
I just would like to thank the Development Authority of the North Country for bringing this forward for many families throughout the county. This may play a critical role in helping to extend broadband access to areas that otherwise would continue without it. I think during the COVID, we've seen critical gaps and problems facing families, and the Development Authority of the North Country deserves a great deal of credit for coming forward and offering to help us extend this vital service that will not only help families, but help economic development, help attract businesses to the North Country, help bring, help families return to the North Country and bring their businesses with them. I would urge everyone to support these.
Anyone else? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Bianco,
Yes.
Berg,
Yes.
Arquette,
Yes.
Terminelli,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
Yes.
Denisha,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers,
Yes.
Fay,
Yes.
Haggard,
Yes.
15 yes.
The resolution is carried. County Administrator's report.
Okay, a few items to update you on this evening. COVID-19 related, I wanted to let you know that the county is working and continues to work with the schools on testing readiness. We had communications with them each week since the uptick in numbers, and they're working on those plans, and we'll provide them to you once we receive them and what that may look like for the districts. We're going to meet tomorrow to begin the process of vaccine readiness and what that might entail. Certainly you heard an explanation from health systems tonight from Dr. Williams about their efforts, but also making a determination as far as what the county's position or role should be able to share that information back with you. As indicated by both Dr. Williams and Dana tonight, we are focusing on the stay home if you're sick pillar this week of the 5 pillars of prevention, and certainly looking to destigmatize calling in sick. I'm as guilty as any. When we excuse our behaviors because we think it's a runny nose, or we think it's a dry cough, or we think there's a different way we need to look at it with COVID-19. And I think certainly some information you'll see out in the press this week is going to encourage folks to take that responsibility onto themselves and make those calls if they are sick or if they are not feeling well. I will be recommending that we continue with our 50% staffing through January 8th, 2021 for another 30 days. Also extending out that state of emergency. The sheriff has suspended visitation at the jail with consideration given to what we're seeing with the number increase. I also took a look with our HR director, Johnny Dorothy, at our numbers associated with our own health plan. And out of the over 2,500 covered lives of our county health plan, 16% of our covered lives have been tested. That may mean a single person has been tested more than once. And out of that percentage of covered lives tested, we have a 4% positivity rate. But out of the overall covered lives, we are at 1%. The cost we've seen through October 31st associated with testing, the overall cost is $248,000. Wanted to give you an update also related to the funding between both the CARES Act and the COVID, which we will be seeking FEMA reimbursement for. Related to the CARES Act, we have expended $208,000. And related to COVID, $198,000. So as you've seen through the year, some of the CARES Act monies come in. So there has been some revenue received against the 208. We're preparing now to submit for the FEMA reimbursement of the 198. And I also just wanted to make mention that I will be including the purchase of the Rheonics machines and any of the supplies to accompany that into our FEMA reimbursement. However, not knowing how long that battle will take or how many cents on the dollar will be paid, I don't necessarily think that's a value when you're making the decision about making that acquisition. Certainly something we'll always go for when reimbursement is an option. Also, just to update, thank you for approving the resolution for the purchase. We will be working out delivery. As mentioned by Legislator Akers tonight, we will have the machines delivered directly to the hospital location. I've received contacts from both hospital systems. They're working with Mike Cunningham in procurement to make sure that everything happens without any glitches when it's time for delivery. And as he also mentioned, we should see those before the end of the month. Following the approval also tonight of the leases for those machines, we will work on those to get those before the chairman as well as before the hospitals for signature as well. Just to give you an update today, the courts released information. They are also going to be reducing operations once again. They're looking at 40% for their office staff and 30% in New York City. They're also reducing and moving back to a reduced proceedings schedule. So what that looks like, we'll certainly provide you with an update, but we again expect to see a reduced presence in the courthouse as well. That concludes the COVID component of the update. Wanted to mention to you that the Northside Energy Center, which is a solar project that's proposed for Messina, Brazier, and Norfolk, will be hosting a virtual open house on Wednesday, December 16th from 11 to 12, and then another one from 5 to 6. So certainly legislators in those areas, I'll make sure you have that information so that you can log on. But anyone interested, let me know and we'll make sure you can be a part of that. Wanted to make you aware that we received an additional payment from Messina in the amount of $245,000. So that the balance remaining is $245,000. So the expectation, I believe, was by year end or shortly into 2021 to complete that payment. I shared with all of you the upgrade in the bond rating provided to us by Moody's Investment Services over the weekend. We have been upgraded on our Canton Human Services Initiative bonds from an A3 to an A2, which in my mind puts on the landscape or on the horizon a AAA rating in the next 5 to 7 years. So that's certainly one of my goals, and demonstrating the fiscal health of the county or the improvement to the fiscal health in the county in situations that we're dealing with now with COVID-19 is something that both Renee and I are very proud of. Moving on, I wanted to let you know that last Wednesday, December 2nd, we held our second part of our department head training via Zoom. So annually, I traditionally would hold all the department heads together for a full day of all of the required trainings that the county needs to provide by state or otherwise, sexual harassment, workplace violence, all of those. This year, because Zoom fatigue is also a real thing, I divided that up into 2 separate days, and we concluded that last week. We've had 9 department head meetings held via Zoom and had exemplary attendance at all of those meetings. We're going to continue on, much like I expect Board of Legislators, to hold our department head meetings on Zoom until it becomes safe to do otherwise. Next week, we'll have a combined services and operations, and then on December 21st is our finance meeting. We're scheduling 2 public hearings that evening, as well as what appears to be a growing agenda. There'll be one public hearing for planning for one of their grants that's required, as well as the police reform public hearing. We are also looking at the police reform resolution coming forward, as well as a required highway project that needs to be approved before the end of the year. So we're working out the times. We certainly anticipate that there'll be some folks who'd like to speak at the public hearing relative to police reform. So we're working through that. If you can be patient with us, we'll be announcing those public hearing times, but we're going to back that up, hopefully, so that we provide time and have Finance Committee follow those meetings. Annually, I just want to mention to you, because they'll be coming up on that agenda, the rules of procedure are reviewed and a schedule for 2021 will be provided for you in draft form. What we thought we would do tomorrow is send out our existing rules of procedure so that you can take a look at it without the draft schedule, because we're looking at that now. But also invite your comments and feedback. Certainly this year, I think we've seen some extended timeframes associated with meetings. So we're looking at whether it makes sense still to combine all of our meetings. If you recall, there are some months with holidays that we're required to put committees together because there are only 4 Mondays and we lose one to the holiday. But in the summertime, the board had directed us to combine meetings so that it provided for some more free time while the weather is nice in the North Country. So we'll be looking for some guidance. We'll put together a draft schedule for you, and then we can talk about that at Finance Committee and prepare for that adoption in January. Also annually, we bring forward the contracts resolution. We'll bring forward the newspaper resolution and ask that you consider reinstituting North Country this week, as they now meet the criteria to be considered an official newspaper for St. Lawrence County. So we'll bring that forward to you as well. And if you recall, in January, the Board of Legislators tabled the request for dog quarantine to the Finance Committee in December. So we'll also bring that forward. And should there be no action taken, it will remain on the table, which is at the board's discretion. Wanted to mention also tomorrow, Vacancy Review Committee will be held at 11:30. We have 2 legislators joining us. We have 11 vacancies from 7 departments. And we also will have 2 additional that came up today, and they're relative to the correctional facilities. So those will be added. And finally, the adopted budgets are on your desk for those of you who are here. We'll mail to legislators on Zoom your adopted budgets, and we'll include for you, if you'd like to return them, because we like to recycle the pieces, a posted paid envelope to send back the tentative budgets, so then we can make use of those as well. Unless there's any questions, that's all. Oh, one other thing. We did provide flu vaccines this year for our employees. And if you recall, public health, prior to the uptick in cases, was able to provide 1 drive-through clinic, which went remarkably well. And we vaccinated 83 employees in all of public health. We've partnered with the pharmacist at Kinney's to provide an additional 31 vaccines in 2 clinics. So I'm now surveying the interest, both at the correctional facility, because while I provided 1 hour release time to go and have these vaccinations, it's not as easy for our road deputies, our highway folks, or our correctional officers to step away from their responsibilities. So if we can, and there's interest, we'll take it to them. Kinney's has been wonderful about working with us as well. And this last clinic that we had, we opened it up to the court staff. As you recall, not that many weeks ago, we had a COVID-19 case. So the healthier we can keep the court staff in a mixed-use building, the better for everyone. Any questions?
Mr. Akers.
Ruth, you mentioned, if I'm correct here, $248,000 is what we've spent for testing our employees.
Correct.
How many tests is that?
Oh, I have that on my desk. Can I get that to you? I can share that information with you. I believe there are 649 and there were 407 employees, but I'll confirm that.
So it's a lot more than.
Well, I will say employees, covered lives.
Excuse me?
It may not just be employees.
But only 649 tests, you think?
I believe so.
So it's a lot more than $100 a test then.
Okay.
Where are we having the test done?
Anywhere they.
It's where the clients choose?
Yes.
Okay. The other question I had was, you had mentioned that we had forgotten about this, the $245,000 that's owed to us by the town of Messina, that's for workers' comp.
Correct.
So the last that I knew is that they owed us $900,000. When have they made the other payments?
So they made a payment. I can find out the date. I thought we reported that out to you about a month ago, I think. And then this one was just received, and that leaves a balance of $245,000.
And when was that money actually due? January 31st?
I can check on that for you. I believe there's a due date, but I think there's a little bit of flexibility there in the early part of the year.
We do. I think when we left the discussion, they were looking for combining some things and doing some bonding. So I don't know if that ever took place. Maybe legislators from the CNEP can inform us of that. In this, there's no interest on this money?
I believe so. The county attorney, our plan administrator, is with us this evening as well.
Okay, I'd like to ask Mr. Button about interest, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Please do.
Mr. Button, can you answer that, please?
Mr. Akers, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent. To answer your question, there is no interest that is assessed. This is a courtesy that we have extended to members in the past who have asked for additional time to pay within the fiscal year in which the debt is owed. The town of Messina and I have had additional discussions where they have now indicated to me that they believe that they can honor the 2020 debt in 2020. Now, it's likely we'll see that last $245,000 sometime around 12/31. But they have indicated at this point that they no longer believe that they will need to bond to cover the extent of the debt associated with their apportionment for the 2020 year. They did indicate that there may need to be a reassessment on 2021, but we haven't reached that point yet.
Okay, thank you.
Also, any other questions of the county administrator? Seeing none, is there any old business? Is there any new business? Seeing none, are there any committee report? Oh, Ms. Haggart.
I wanted to bring up the idea about that I mentioned to Dr. Williams, that Jefferson County and see if there's any interest among my colleagues on putting something together for a mass testing event. And I'd be willing to do more research on it if that's necessary, but I'd like to just put it out there and see if anybody else would be interested in pursuing that.
Mr. Burke.
I think it's a great idea, Margaret, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Anyone else? Mr. Arquette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the timing is very good. If it was something that we could put together in somewhat of a rapid pace because of the uptick. So I support it.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Akers?
So the testing that's being done, Mrs. Haggard, is this where they're sending the lab results out? So they're not going to get a quick response?
Yes, and according to Jefferson County, they're getting results in 2 to 3 days through the tests that they're using. And I know Dr. Williams told us that it was quite a long time. I mean, I can call them tomorrow or the next day and see how today went. And I would certainly be interested, because if we can't get the test back soon, I think it loses its effectiveness. But I think it would also be a great way to rally the troops, so to speak, and get people on board in the county to know that there's testing, it's easy to get, and make us St. Lawrence County strong. And it'd be something that maybe people could buy into the whole concept that we're all in this together. But if it takes 7 or 8 days or 9 days to get the results back, I don't think it has much purpose.
Ms. Curran?
So I had a COVID swab Friday morning, and I had test results on my phone Sunday morning, so less than 2 days. And that was through St. Lawrence Health Systems.
Mr. Forsythe?
And it was negative.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great idea. The only concern I would have is I think the public health department's pretty stressed at the moment, so I'd want to make sure Dana thinks she can handle it, or, you know, I think they got a lot of eggs in their basket right now, but I haven't found with it at all.
And I can say, Margaret, that was held in conjunction with the State Department of Health, who actually supplied personnel to that effort. I think that there would need to be some coordination initially with them. And I too think it's a good idea. Mr. Arquette?
I agree with you, Joe. I'm pretty sure that I don't know the time frame, but a little while back in Messina, that the state came into Messina to do something similar. So I think you're on the right track, getting the state involved in something like that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Akers?
Well, we have Dr. McGuire right there. Maybe she'd like to make a comment.
Dr. McGuire?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with the state, and like we did for the Messina testing event, you have to organize it with the state, and they provide resources based on what they can do, and they also ask what you yourself can provide. So, we've also asked them, because of the nursing home outbreak, to come and help with testing and things like that. And so it really, I've asked the question to the Jefferson County to see how they got this testing event. They also had one in the summertime when they had that outbreak along like the Clayton area. And so it really depends what's going on with the state, who they can get. So I've put the question out to see how they got theirs to come up. We've put the question out just kind of several times, and you do have to provide a rationale to the state. And so it must be that I'd like to know who they're having do the testing, because they asked us if they were going to come up and do the testing Did we have nurses that we could provide? And at this time, we don't have the nurses. And so sometimes it's a combination of the resources that the state can provide, that we can provide. And so, maybe if we do it in concert with the hospital systems, that would help us, just as well. So we are asking those questions.
Anybody else? Mr. Fay?
Yes, I believe that, I don't know, I'm going to ask Ruth this question. Was there a request to use the Harold Smith parking lot that we were going to deal with tonight?
Yes, there is.
Are we going to be able to deal with it? I do not have it in front of me.
We'll get that to you. We're going to discuss it in closed session first.
Anybody else? Under old or new business or committee reports? Seeing none, we have need for executive session for litigations, negotiations, personnel, and appointments. Can somebody enlighten me about personnel?
It is for the provision of employment.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, seconded by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Perkins. All in favor of going into executive session?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. As soon as we get